Finley to throw. Over the middle, intercepted. Wolford again. Wolford the other way at the 30, the 40. Wolford to midfield. Miles Wolford with the pick. The Heels on the doorstep of an enormous victory. Williams is the running back next to Howe. Play action. Howe will now lob it down the near side. Newsom with a man all over him. Pins the ball against the back of the defender and brings it in. Heels can get a first down at the 3. Now, pump fake to the right. Now he's going to run to the left. Howe at the 5. Takes the shot. Pinballing off the chains for the touchdown. Sam Howe showing the toughness for 6. Orioles down 4, 35-31. May has the shotgun snap. Pressure coming. Rolls to the right. Throws to the end zone. Touchdown! Touchdown, Antoine Green! 16 seconds to go. No flag. Snapping it off the 8-yard line. May pulls it, tries to roll it apart. Oh, now he's going to throw it and score! Throws it to Payson in the end zone for the touchdown. They are throwing this left hand. Was rolling out on the run and threw it left-handed. Bernard fields it at the 26. Heading to the far side. Gio at the 35. Gio, he's at the 50. No, he's not. Yes, he is. Gio, he's going to take it for a touchdown. Are you kidding me?
What's going on, guys? Welcome into another edition of the Heel Tough Blog Podcast. It's your host, Anthony Pagnotta, here with you guys, as always, coming at you on a Thursday night, and it's been a while since we've been here on the Heel Tough Blog side of things. Of course, been taking you through the basketball season on the Four Corner side of things, and really been enjoying doing that, but definitely want to talk a little bit of Tar Heel football, give you some updates on what's going on around the program as they get ready to head into the month of March here. They're a couple of days in and now planning on when they're going to be opening spring practice. As of right now, no date on that just yet, but hoping to get that sometime soon so that we know when Carolina will be kicking off the start of the 2026 season, when we will be able to get to Kenan Stadium to see the team in action and at least get some eyes on them towards what is a big season coming up for Carolina football, an important one for the head coach. We'll talk tonight about 3 players that have left the team prior to spring practice beginning. We'll also tell you a little bit about the performances of Marcus Allen and Thaddeus Dixon at the NFL Scouting Combine. But the most important thing that we're going to talk about, what we lead off with here tonight, is Mack Brown being honored by Carolina. That was last Monday at the Louisville game for the basketball team. And, you know, some people with, some debatable topics in terms of what they think about the choice to honor him now, and also where they believe that he ranks in terms of the all-time coaches. So that's really what we're here to talk about to start off tonight's podcast. And as I said, Mack was honored last Monday at the Louisville game. It was in the first half of the game. He was honored for his time at Carolina. I thought it was a really nice thing to do for a guy that, was just a year removed from being, fired and, Bill Belichick taking over. And they bring out Belichick. They bring out, I forget who else was out there. Lee Roberts was out there, and I forget who else came out to midcourt with him. But, it was a really nice moment, I think, for a guy that really values the University of North Carolina. And we wondered what the relationship would be like after Carolina fired him, especially in the way that they went about firing him. So, certainly a guy that deserves a lot of credit for what he did in his time at Carolina. 113, 79, and 1 with 10 bowl appearances, including 4 January bowl games that he was responsible for in his time in Chapel Hill. Just, to begin it off, Josh Marlowe, what did you think about the choice by the Tar Heels to go ahead and honor Mack Brown as close as they did to his time of being fired?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it made sense. I didn't have an issue with it. It's better to do these things in a timely manner as opposed to waiting, especially just considering Mack Brown's age and knowing that he's in the back nine of his career as a life man, I guess, if you will. The thing that you didn't want to have is you never wanted him to feel unwelcome back at Carolina. You wanted him to be a part of what Carolina football could still be and what the university is because of how he felt about the place. And yeah, Carolina made the tough decision to fire him, but coaches know when they get hired, they're getting hired to be fired. There are only so many, Dean Smith, Roy Williams of the world where you get to have a legendary career. You get to go out on top. I mean, Texas fired him. I think you got to remember that as well, as even though it was like a mutual decision, they made it a mutual decision so that they didn't have to outright fire him. So I thought it was good to have him back. He's still in the modern era of this program. Still the most accomplished coach. He's the coach that got us as close to winning a national championship as we've ever been, and being a nationally relevant program, which is something that as Carolina fans we crave. We're starved for. So, and I think it was good on him because when he left, he was salty and rightfully so. Had he been given the resources that Carolina made possible for Bill Belichick, you kind of wonder how the final few years of his tenure in Carolina maybe would have played out a little bit differently. So it was good having him back. You know that he loves Carolina. You know that he loves Chapel Hill, and I think now more than ever, he feels as well, he'll feel welcome to come back if he wants to come back and visit. Where I feel like last year was probably still too fresh if he wanted to come back and be a part of a game day or be honored at a football game.
Yeah, I think, what you said that I think is perfect is that why wait to do these types of things, man? You want to honor guys, just go ahead and honor them. And I think the same thing, people were debating about RJ Davis and his jersey going into the rafters on the basketball side of things and doing it so early. I mean, why wait? You don't know what life is going to present moving forward. And for Carolina, I think, leaving those salty feelings that he had and leaving that on the table for so many years and then having to circle back around to it, at the end of his life or, even after he's gone would have been just a horrible way to do it. And so I commend this, this group, the chancellor, along with, the athletic department for making sure that they knew, hey, it's time to honor him. Let's honor him quickly here. Let's turn what was a bad situation into a good situation. Let's get him back on campus. Let's let him know that we feel like he is a big part of our history here, and he's a historic coach that needs to be remembered. I think that's one thing that everybody can agree upon is that Mack Brown deserves to be remembered for his time in Chapel Hill. I know there are a lot of people that, look back at his second stint. And I mean, you look at it, the first stint, 69, 46, and 1 in his first stint in Chapel Hill. The second stint, not nearly as successful in terms of winning percentage, 44 and 33, but did do it in a different era of the sport. Also did it in a time where, remember the program that he was taking over. Now, he got off to, a bad start to his first tenure in Chapel Hill, really turned it around with what he did down the stretch in his final couple of seasons in his first stint. But in his second stint, remember that he was taking over what was a complete train wreck towards the end of the Larry Fedora era. And again, that's no slight at Larry, but that's just where the program had gotten to. And he comes in and corrects course immediately. Goes out, gets his quarterback in Sam Howell, and immediately turns Carolina into a team that's competing in the ACC. And so I think he deserves credit for that. I know that he didn't accomplish what we were hoping that he would accomplish with a guy like Sam Howell. It doesn't finish the way that you were hoping that it would with Sam. And then, of course, when you go on to Drake May, there wasn't nearly as much success as I think a lot of people wanted. But I'm not of the opinion that his second tenure is part of, something that affected his legacy. I do think that there are people that do believe that. I do think that there are a lot of people that are still salty about that part of his, coaching tenure, and they still believe that he should be crucified for that. I don't think that's necessarily the way that you should be looking at it. I think you should look at it as, this was still a pretty successful stint. And especially, as you said, when you get towards the end of his tenure and you hear how basically there was no money to keep certain guys around, basically Drake Bay stayed because he was a Carolina guy. Omarion Hampton stayed because he was a Carolina guy. The rest of these guys, they were on the roster, but they weren't being paid all that much money. Not the type of money that you should be getting paid. Not the type of money that guys that were on this past year's team made, because you made the full investment into the football program for Bill Belichick. I asked it when we were talking at times last year, why did you not put the money into the program with Mack Brown as your head coach? I mean, I guess maybe you knew that it was coming to an end, but it felt like Mack really deserved that. And it's a shame that he did not get the same type of funding that a guy like Bill Belichick got, because I think if he had that type of funding, maybe you do end up seeing a better offensive line. Maybe you do end up seeing a better defense that could have really helped Carolina close those seasons a lot stronger than they did.
Yeah, we'll never know. It's not just the NIL money that Carolina committed. I think had the House settlement come down sooner, and there would have been the revenue shared, and Carolina would have had $13.5 million in additional money to build the roster. I think things go really different, but it's hard for me to crucify a coach that took you to an ACC championship game and took you to a New Year's Six bowl game. We're talking about a program that hasn't won a conference championship in over 40 years. We're going on 50 years since you last won a conference title. The New Year's Six bowl game, that was the first time that Carolina had played in one of those since he was quite literally there the first time, because even in Larry Fedora's 11-win season, you didn't go to a New Year's Six bowl game. You were in a good bowl game. You were in a reputable bowl game, but it wasn't a New Year's Six bowl game. He put you on that stage as well. Drake May was a legitimate Heisman contender. That was really good exposure. The best way to sum up, I think, his second tenure is that his downfall, or the shortcomings, are what pressed Carolina to commit even more so to winning than they were when he was their head coach. And it's kind of ironic to say that, but I do think that's kind of where what forced their hand was. You've got a new chancellor that values football in a different way than your previous chancellor did in terms of what the winning can do, what the revenue can provide. And Carolina's more committed to doing that than ever before. And so, look, I wanted him back when they hired him. I was in favor of the hire, and as difficult as it was, and I do think they made the right decision to move on. He still accomplished a lot of things during his second stint back in Chapel Hill. He made the program desirable. He upped recruiting. You look at the facilities that Carolina was able to get upgraded. Look at some of you got the Chris Smith donation and what that was able to do for the football program as well. And when Larry Fedora was fired, the program was at a crossroads. You didn't quite know how desirable the job was. But 6 years later, when they're moving on from Mack Brown, as much as the NFL was done with Bill Belichick, he was still able to identify a job that was attractive to him. And that was, I think, the most important thing that he did during his second stint was when his time came to an end, he made it a place where people would want to be. And I think that's where Carolina finds itself, even after a disappointing first year for Belichick and his staff. I think it's still a place that people want to be. people want to be a part of, and they want to be a part of the solution to finally getting this program over the top. And so I think that's how you got to look at it. Did he achieve all the big things maybe on the field that he wanted to? No, he didn't. But I think some of the stuff that he achieved off the field was just as important from a perception standpoint when you go back to just how we felt about the program after winning 5 games in the final 2 years of the Larry Fedora era.
Yeah, he did more than he was supposed to do. He was supposed to come back and make this job desirable again. He really gave Carolina an appetite to succeed at football and get the next Drake May to a New Year's Six bowl game. Get him, get this program potentially on the college football playoff stage at some point in its existence. Now, didn't go how they planned with Bill Belichick. They thought that was going to be much more successful in year one than it was. But at the same time, I do believe that, there is a lot of good that's coming out of this. And the future of the program, I think, could reflect back very well on Mack Brown in his second tenure here, because it really did get some of those people chomping at the bit to get a very competitive football program in here, not just one that would be referred to as the sleeping giant, the phrase that I absolutely hate and just never want said again about the Tar Heel football program because it just drives me insane. I think the biggest thing that I saw when I, put out the post on social media was not really the fact of should he have been honored. There were some people that were debating that amongst themselves before it ended up happening, but I feel like most people came to an agreement after it ended up happening that it was the right thing to do. The real conversation was, is he the most successful coach in program history? And look, I mean, you could go back to Carl Snavely, and I know he was here for a decent amount of time, but I think, when you look at it, even he wasn't here long enough to be considered the greatest coach in Carolina football history. I know some people were bringing up Bill Dooley as the most successful in Carolina football history as well. Dick Crum certainly had his time where he was successful at Carolina. But, I mean, when I look at it, I think all things put together, and you have to factor in the fact that he was a guy that decided to come back to Carolina and do it one more time. I think, honestly, he's still, in my mind, he's the greatest coach in Tar Heel football history. Not saying it's not close, but I do think that he is still atop that mountain, even with that second tenure here at Carolina, which some think hurt him.
Yeah, no, I definitely feel the same way. You look at his first tenure, he starts 1-10 his first 2 years. By the time he leaves, Carolina's knocking on the door of winning a national championship, and with that, Texas came calling. And I think the people that are not willing to give him like the credit that he deserves and that he's earned are the people that never forgave him for leaving. But if every coach, if they're offered the Texas job, should leave 10 times out of 10. There's an argument to be made that's the best job in college sports, from what it pays, what the resources that Texas has, the access to money that they have. Of course, we were not. I mean, I was 2 years old when he left, so not only was I not watching, I wasn't covering. I would like to think that had we been around back then, I would have understood why he left a place like UNC to go to Texas, where he did finally, win a national championship, had a handful of 10-win seasons, was going to the Big 12 title game on a pretty annual basis there that it felt like. So that's what I look at, is he was good enough his first time to get hired by Texas, which is, depending, as I mentioned, at worst, a top 3 job in the sport. And the second time, you produce your 2 best quarterbacks in the history of your program. You get back to a conference championship game. You get to a New Year's Six bowl game, and you make the job so attractive that the winningest head coach in the history of the NFL took it after you got fired. I think I don't know if someone else, does Scott Satterfield have that same impact on Carolina football? I think that answer is no. And remember, they chose Mack Brown over Satterfield, who everyone thought was going to get the job. Of course, he ends up going to Louisville. Now he's the head coach at Cincinnati. I know he doesn't have an ACC championship to point back to, but he did as much as you could do without winning a conference title. And I think that's going to be the thing that's going to really determine Bill Belichick's tenure is what does he do? How close does he get Carolina on the national scale? Because now you've got a 12-team playoff that's about to expand as many as 16. So you don't have to theoretically win a conference title to win a national championship. So how close does Bill Belichick get them to doing one of those two things? So for my money, he's the best football coach that Carolina football has ever had. And it's going to take a pretty special man to come in here and make me feel otherwise, because there haven't been too many coaches that had two successful runs at a place like UNC like Mack Brown did.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I really think his second tenure, many people say it hurt him. I think it really helped him to continue to stay atop that pedestal of guys that have coached at Carolina. I mean, look, Bill Dooley, 3 ACC championships in his time at Carolina. The one thing that I will say is you go back and you look at the ACC at that time, much, much easier for Carolina to win than when Mack Brown was there. Mack Brown had to deal with peak Florida State with Bobby Bowden there as their head coach, had them as one of the best teams in the entire country each and every year in the 90s. And that was what he was competing against. I mean, you're talking about in 1971, Carolina going 9-3 on the season and winning the ACC because they went perfect in conference. 1977, 8-3-1. They go 5-0-1 in conference. I think if Mack Brown was coaching during those times, Mack Brown probably ends up winning 3 titles because the best season was right there with what Mack Brown accomplished. An 11-1 season. The team won the Sun Bowl that year, and they were 6-0 in conference. That was in 1972. So he definitely, look, Bill Dooley deserves all the credit for what he was able to do at Carolina. Definitely a reason why he is in that second tier of coaches. I did this a few years ago where I went through and put them in tiers, and he was in that second tier. I think that's where Dick Crum probably is as well. A guy that won it in 1980, was 11-1, 6-0. Won the Astro Blue Bonnet Bowl at the time, which was a big bowl game back in that time. Did end up with a record of 72-41-3 during his stint at Carolina in what was 9 years, the exact same span as Mack Brown's first tenure in Chapel Hill. It makes a lot of sense that he's right there, basically very identical records. But again, I think, when you look back on the ACC back then, wasn't nearly as tough as when Florida State, of course, comes over and enters the conference. That was really what changed the ACC, what made it more difficult during that time. And so, I would still say that Mack Brown, he got Carolina as close as to being a national title team as just about anybody. Those teams, they ended up finishing inside of the top 12 in the AP poll, but they were never anywhere near where Carolina got to with Mack Brown at the in 1997, where Carolina finished 4th in the AP poll, and they were right on the precipice of being a team. If they end up beating Florida State, now not only do they win the ACC, there's a good chance that they're playing for a national championship. And so I think that's going to be hard to replicate. I think, again, it's very close, but Mack Brown edges those guys out. And I would say you're right. It's going to take a pretty special guy to come through here and win, the way that Mack Brown did at Carolina. And the other thing is that people need to realize, last thing on Mack Brown here, they need to realize this is one of the greatest coaches we've ever seen. This is a guy that is 7th in Division I wins in the history of Division I football with 288. And he is the first head coach at the Division I level to win 100+ games at 2 different schools. And one of those is a school that had as high of a standard as anybody in Texas. And he won a national championship there in 2005, of course, beating maybe the team that is the best to not win a national championship in that 05 USC team with Vince Young, who, you know, many people believe could have won the Heisman Trophy that year as well. So, you know, he deserves a lot of credit. Tip of the cap to Mack Brown. And hopefully one day we'll be able to interview him here on this podcast. That would be amazing. All right, let's get to some of the news and notes around the program before we get out of here. I did want to mention the 3 players that did leave the team prior to spring practice. This was reported by Inside Carolina's Spencer Haskell last week. That was Evan Bennett, the linebacker, Court Halsey, the walk-on tight end, and Ladarian Williams, the former 3-star recruit on the defensive line from last year. Now, Ladarian Williams did not play a single snap a year ago, was a guy that was going to be buried deep on the depth chart. Not really shocking to see him go. Court Halsey, you know, again, a walk-on, probably wants to look to see if he can find somewhere where he maybe ends up on a roster where he could get a scholarship, maybe end up actually you know, playing some in his next stop. That would be nice for him. I mean, yeah, Carolina saw action in 4 games, including against Syracuse back in 2023, where he registered the lone target of his career. And then Evan Bennett, a guy that played 69 snaps on special teams last season, totaling 1 tackle across the 4 games that he was active for. So for 4 games there towards the end of the season, he was pretty impactful for Carolina on special teams. He was at least a guy that was out there playing on special teams for them, and he was a depth linebacker. The good news is that when you look at it, don't really think any of these are going to really affect Carolina all that much. You know, I do think that the guy who would be Bennett, but the thing is that, you know, for Carolina, you do bring in 2 experienced linebackers out of the portal, and Peyton Seelman from Richmond, Derek McDonald from Syracuse are coming in, and then you've got the 2 freshmen that you're really excited about, you know, in Calvin Thomas and DQ Forkpa. So hopefully those guys grow up quickly. I mean, these ones, not really anything moving, but ultimately, what's your takeaway on the fact that you are having more guys leave the program? Stuff that, you know, you just really didn't see under the guy that we just talked about here a minute ago in Mack Brown.
Yeah, look, the impact, are these going to be impactful departures? No, maybe Bennett from a special teams perspective, just having a guy that you could count on going into spring ball as what you know he's capable of bringing. It's just another negative storyline in some form or fashion. And I think that's the thing that Bill Belichick and I think this coaching staff, I think that's what they're just trying to avoid going into year 2. There was just a lot of noise around Carolina football a year ago, and how much of it was positive? I mean, and pretty much after the opening drive against TCU, it went all downhill. But there was also some stuff before we even got to the first game of the year, and then storylines that developed during the season. I think Belichick I think he could really benefit from a quiet offseason, a quiet spring where Carolina's just going about their business. And, you know, that hasn't necessarily been the case where you've had 2 separate times, multiple players leave your program. You pull up, you know, you make yourself present for the biggest home game of the year for the basketball side of things, and your girlfriend's wearing a shirt that's taking a shot at your former employer. You know, at least he was cordial during the Mack Brown thing, and nothing, you know, negative went on with that. So I think that's just the thing is I just want there to be either no noise or just some positive energy around this team. And no, is this going to determine Carolina's win-loss total for the upcoming year? No, it's not. But it feels like every time we get something out of Chapel Hill around Carolina football, it's usually you're not negative. And that's kind of exhausting as someone that covers them and that's someone that is a fan of them. But hopefully, this is something that will not be a big talking point moving forward. And whenever we get into spring ball, maybe we'll hear some more positive things about the outlook for the 2026 season, because I do think that if Carolina has another noisy year off the field and there aren't results on it, I think that could force this administration that's committing to winning in football to make a decision they probably didn't think about when they hired him, which is firing after 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't think this is that big of a deal. We saw this, throughout the regular season last year. We saw guys that were leaving the program. It's not all that shocking. Now, the thing that's different, and you might say, well, yeah, what's the big deal? They're leaving before spring practice. They're going to get in the spring portal. Spring portal doesn't exist. So that's the thing that makes this a little weird. Now, there is going to be, a push to basically get some guys in the portal. They have said, and, it's been reported by, I think, some of the guys over at On3, there is going to be something that kids can do, because we know in this day and age that restricting a kid from going where they want to go is almost impossible. There's going to be something that kids can do that can probably get them into the portal, get them to the school that they want to go to. But this just seems weird. Now, but again, I don't know what the Evan Bennett situation is. I'm really hoping it's not some sort of career-ending injury or anything like that, something that happened in the off-season program or anything of that nature. Really hoping that it's him wanting to leave and go find somewhere where he can play, and it just ends up working out for him. But if that could ultimately be what it is. We've seen guys medically retire before and stuff like that. So if that is the case, then, it is what it is. It's not a big deal. The other guys, I mean, Williams was a late add to Carolina's recruiting class last year. Just a guy that was there to be a body. They, could be looking to potentially add more guys in the transfer portal. I'm not sure either that or, again, he's just buried on the depth chart where he's just like, look, it's not worth me sticking around if I'm not going to be able to climb the depth chart. Same thing with Court Halsley. If he believes that, look, I'm a guy that's buried on the depth chart, I'm not going to be able to play this year. They went out. Remember, Carolina got 3 tight ends in the transfer portal. So it's very possible that all those guys are ahead of him on the depth chart. They got some, guys out of the high school ranks as well. So he's probably just like, look, I've been here long enough. Let me see if I can go find somewhere where I can play, whatever. More impactful is what happened earlier in the offseason, which we talked about, which was Keon Chapman and Dayron Parks looking like they are not going to enroll with Carolina, or if they are, it's going to be delayed. That's a bigger deal. That's especially because there are people that believe that it is academic. Yeah, that certainly could be a little bit of a problem if they are lowering the standards and guys still aren't making it through to get to Chapel Hill. It's like, okay, well, you got to make sure you're recruiting the right type of guys to come here. So I think those are the things, but you're right. It's every time we get a storyline, man, there's got to be something. The showing up at the Duke game with the Orchids of Asia, pullover that she was wearing. Why? Just what are you doing? It doesn't make any sense. And it's what makes this regime frustrating, man. Hopefully they can power through it. We're going to be talking more about this team leading up to spring practice, about where they where we believe they are on the field. But let's not have more things to talk about off the field. Let's try to avoid those storylines. Let's hope these are the last guys that end up defecting from the program before the start of spring practice, and that we don't have to worry about a lot defecting during spring practice, because it'd be nice to leave with, the roster that you have in the spring, knowing that they're going to be intact and ready to go for the fall camp. And, they'll all be together during the summer working out and everything like that. Something that the, taking away of that second portal is supposed to be able to make things a little bit easier. And hopefully that will allow Carolina to have more success this year. Because you're right, man. It's a crucial year for Bill Belichick. He's got to start winning games on the field, because if not, They could just say, hey, especially with all the headaches you're causing off the field, we're going to go ahead and flush this and just get out from under it. Last thing that I did want to mention here before we get out of here, our closing note, Marcus Allen, Thaddeus Dixon conclude their NFL scouting combine. They did so on Friday. They were part of the defensive back group that went out there. I thought, decent nights for both guys. I thought Thaddeus Dixon caught the ball really well in the on-field drills. Marcus Allen had a couple that he dropped, but I do think that for the most part, he did a pretty decent job of at least making himself, look like he fit in with the group. And that's ultimately what you want to do. You want to at least look like you fit with all the other guys out there. I think he's going to be one of those guys that probably is going to remain to be projected as an undrafted guy. I would be shocked if a team ends up taking him even on day 3 of the NFL draft. But I do think that he's a guy that's going to be in camp with somebody. I think he's done enough to be able to show them that he's going to be able to do that. Ran a 4.5. I think it was either a 4.5 flat or 4.51 in the 40. So a pretty good time for him. I think he'll be fine enough to get an invite to camp. But I think Thaddeus Dixon, if you're looking for someone that's going to stick on an NFL roster, that's going to be your guy. Everybody else, I think, I looked at some of the stocks for some of the other guys. Daniel King was a guy that appeared on Pro Football Focus's big board. Of course, did not get an invite to any of the postseason All-Star games, did not get an invite to the Combine. So his is going to bank on his pro day. Same thing with Chad Lindbergh, who's way down on some of these draft boards. If you get into the really, really deep draft boards that go into the 40s, 50s, and even 60s at certain position groups, that's where you'll find him. So I'm not sure if he's going to even get a camp invite. And another guy that I thought would be on there, but it appears nowhere from where I've seen, Andrew Simpson. Just don't think he's going to be making an NFL roster, but that's always a guy to watch on the pro day. And that'll probably be around the same time that they open spring practice. Maybe that exact day that they open spring practice, they'll end up doing the pro day for those guys. We'll have to wait and see ultimately what ends up happening. But again, no start date to spring practice, no date on the practice like a pro event that they did last year, if they're going to call it the same thing, or spring game, anything like that. We're still waiting. Whenever we get that news, we will let you know on the website, heeltopblog.com. The thing to be looking out for here coming up is I will be releasing the top 20 2027 prospects that I most want in the 2027 class. Now, these are realistic. These are guys that Carolina has been recruiting, in-state prospects, guys like that. These are not guys that Carolina has absolutely no shot of landing. We're not just going to pick out the top 5 stars and say, well, this is our wish list. No, it's a little bit different. We do a little bit of a deeper dive on it, find some of those guys that Carolina is either really invested in or, at least as in-state guys we think Carolina could get involved in, could make pushes with at some point. So make sure that you're keeping an eye on the website for that. We'll also do a podcast version of that as well. It'll be me doing that podcast version for you guys, but make sure that you're riding along with us for that. And then, as we said, the start of spring practice, not that far away. And so whenever we get that date, we'll be on here talking about it. We'll be previewing some of the stuff that we expect coming up for Carolina. Now, again, not going to be probably getting a lot out of spring practice in terms of updates, but whenever we do, we'll also be providing you guys with that. The other thing that's important is make sure you guys are over on the YouTube channel and you're watching the Four Corners podcast, because it is go time, ladies and gentlemen. Final game of the regular season is this weekend on Saturday against the Duke Blue Devils. We are going to be back tomorrow night to preview that edition of the rivalry. And you may say to yourself, why are you guys waiting until Friday? Normally you guys go on Thursday night. Well, we want to see the injury report. We want to see where Caleb Wilson shows up on that injury report and ultimately try to give you the best analysis of the game from that perspective, with Caleb Wilson, without Caleb Wilson. So we're going to make sure that we are there for you guys on that. That's why we decided to wait tonight to be able to give that to you. Josh going to have a recap of the Hubert Davis press conference as well that will drop before that. So make sure that you guys go back or go and check that out tomorrow. We would greatly appreciate that. And of course, while you're over there on the channel watching all this great content, make sure you subscribe to the channel. That will help us out a ton. I got 636 subscribers as of this evening before we started recording. We're pushing to get to 700, guys. Help us get there. We'd really appreciate if you did that for us. So that's going to wrap it up for this edition of the podcast tonight. Guys, head over to social media. Give us a follow at HTB Anthony, at HTB Josh for him, and keep up with all of our content over there. Also, check the website every single day, morning, afternoon, and evening for any of the latest news on Tar Heel football and Tar Heel basketball. But that does it for tonight's edition of the podcast. I want to thank everybody who watched and listened to this edition of the podcast. And as always, go Tar Heels.